There were those whose spirit and deeds rose above their bounds of time and space. These helped to shape our country. These were the undaunted.
On land and on the gentle sea, to this fair breeze, unfurl the sails which England's Humphrey Gilbert set. Toward a world our fathers did not know, in seas they scarcely saw.
Well done. Congratulations, Stephen. I lift my cup to your instant posing. A most fitting tribute to our enterprise. And I raise a cup to the brave captains of my little fleet. Master Hayes of the Golden Hind, Master Brown of the Swallow, and Master Andrews of my favorite little vessel, the Squirrel. I toast. Good Master Winter, of this sturdy craft the delight. Things go well on deck. We're through the passage then.
The others are safely in, General, and ourselves almost.
To our safe arrival in the new... What is it? In heaven's name, what is it, man?
Sir Humphrey Gilbert's flagship, the Delight, striking a rock at the narrow entrance to the harbor of St. John's. It was on the afternoon of August the 3rd, 1583, as he sailed majestically through to lay claim to the island of Newfoundland as England's first overseas colony. Good evening, I'm Harry Brown. Welcome to the story of Gilbert, to the Irish, a merciless conqueror, to the English, a soldier resolute in Jesus Christ, to others, one of the Elizabethan era's most dedicated and forgotten imperialists. Despite his inauspicious debut into Canadian history 400 years ago, Gilbert's determination to re-establish an English presence in North America changed the destiny of a continent and lay the cornerstone of the greatest empire the world has ever known. I'm here on Signal Hill, the famous tourist attraction that towers above the landlocked harbor at St. John's, Newfoundland. And from here, I can look out to where Sir Humphrey Gilbert's tiny fleet lay 400 years ago. They are off the narrow entrance to North America's oldest city. They waited 5 days for favorable winds before attempting to navigate the treacherous passage. 3 of the smaller ships got through unscathed, but his own vessel, the Delight, struck the chain rock just inside the harbor mouth. Mounted today with a concrete buoy and a flashing light, it's still a threat to the unwary mariner. Striking it was, to say the least, a blow to the great adventurer's pride as well as to his flagship.
Just a minute. If you're going to do it, at least get it right.
You're him.
Yes, I'm him. And I didn't strike the chain rock at all. I struck the other one, over there, looky, on the other side.
Pancake rock.
How in the name of God's great heaven should I know what ye call it in these times? It was over there on the other side, that's all I remember. Historical calumny, that's what it is. No one could be stupid enough to strike that chain rock. But now that other one, look, over on the other side. You had to carefully slip her over and warp sharp to the harbor side just past it. Wasn't easy in a contrary wind, you know. Nothing to it now, of course, with your fancy engines.
I'm sorry.
And we didn't lay off there for 5 days waiting for fair winds either. It was the fishing captains inside that wouldn't let us through at first. 36 of them that were in there. I thought we were pirates. Where are you getting all this information from? From this?
Well, mostly. It says in there that you waited for 5 days.
5 days. Throw the damnable thing away. Historians never get anything right.
How long are you going to be doing this thing?
About 10 days, I think.
10 days? That's not too bad. I should get permission to stay in the interests of historical accuracy, so to speak. Excellent, excellent. You wouldn't mind my being here?
No, it'd be wonderful. Give us an opportunity to get the information from the horse's mouth, in a manner of speaking.
For a change.
For a change, perhaps, but in the meantime, what were you doing in Newfoundland in 1583 anyway?
What was I doing here in 1583? I'd have been here 20 years earlier if I could have persuaded that woman that we were losing the Americas by default to the Spaniards and the Portugals.
That woman?
Oh, Queen Elizabeth. Oh, I've known her since we were youngsters of 15 or 16. I tried to tell her that we had to have people living in the place in order to have a lasting claim on it. But that was my plan. Forced settlement, organized planting. Clean out the jails in England, I said. Clean out the whorehouses, clean out the almshouses, and bring them over here and put them to work. Well, that was the only way to do it. You see, if we could settle the hungry and needy in a Christian place, under God's
Hold it right there. If we're going to do this, we really have to get it started properly. You have quite a story to tell, Sir Humphrey.
In God's truth, I have.
Now, it says here that you were born in England in 1537.
I was born in the very best part of England, in Devon, in the village of Greenway, on the most beautiful River Dart. An enchanting spot, Mr. Brown. A most enchanting spot.
He was born here at the Greenway estate, on the River Dart in Devon, the second son of Otho and Catherine Gilbert. Now occupying the site at Greenway is the former residence of the famous Agatha Christie, and now lived in by the illustrious writer's daughter. His father was a man of wealth and importance in West Country England, and in addition to owning Greenway and other properties, he'd inherited this magnificent fortified house known as Compton Castle. Dating from the 1300s, it has remained with a single break in the Gilbert family for 600 years. This is Compton Castle today, almost completely restored through the work of Commander Walter Raleigh Gilbert, the 17th generation of his family to live here. Compton had been sold in 1800, but Commander Gilbert bought it back in 1930 and spent the next 26 years repairing the house and rebuilding the Great Hall. In 1950, he donated the entire property to the British National Trust, and each year thousands of tourists come to visit Compton. Commander Gilbert's widow, Mrs. Joan Gilbert, spends part of the year at Compton and is quite familiar with the story of the old building.
It's a manor house, really. It's become called Compton Castle because it has a certain prestige, and it was probably thus named in the Victorian period, and it's a nice alliteration. It's good for tourism and also rather good for the National Trust. It sounds handsome. The house in plan is like the letter H, the east and the west wings, and the great hall connecting them. It was fortified against the French between 1400 and 1500, when the curtain wall that you see as you walk up the drive was added to the base of the two side wings. Notably, and rather rare in this part of the world, the matriculations. They are slots. The guard could hide behind the crenellations, the upright parts, and pour down boiling oil or molten lead or even very hot water down the matriculations on anybody who's rash enough to try and scale our very thick walls. It's all stone, solid limestone, with the exception of the borders, you might say, of the matriculations, and the corbels that support them are of Dartmoor granite, the same kind of granite of which London Bridge is built. The Because the family fortunes had declined considerably as a result of the expedition to Newfoundland, the family moved to Bodmin, and the succeeding people were not particularly interested in the past history, and Compton became an ivy-clad ruin, and they really hadn't much time for it. My husband decided he really must come and see it, and he vowed that one day, with God's help, he would recover the property, if possible restore it enough to live in it. He had no money, but it did, as you see, all come to pass. My husband was really dedicated to it. There we have 3 years on end working. There's no doubt about it. It's an accurate restoration. But when we had the great joy of getting back into the house, one of the first things we did was to restore the chapel to use, and we had to have it reconsecrated by the Bishop of Exeter. We lived here for 16 years after having recovered it, but we had really made ourselves so taxable by the restoration, we really had to give it to the National Trust, who had been angling for us for all those 16 years. They were very, very keen to have Compton, partly because of the historic interest, naturally, of Sir Humphrey and Sir Walter, and also because the architecture, particularly the front wall, is so absolutely pure and unspoiled. Sir Humphrey was very much overshadowed by his half-brother, Sir Walter Raleigh, who was a very popular figure. And Sir Humphrey, of course, his life was much shorter than Raleigh's. Mercifully, he never reached the Tower of London like the poor Sir Walter did. And my husband was very, very anxious to bring him forward. He felt that he was of very great importance, being, as Sir Winston Churchill had said, the first great pioneer of the West. And, of course, the founder of the, well, perhaps now slightly in decline, British Empire, but nevertheless, the first and oldest dominion. He was of great interest.
Humphrey Gilbert was 9 when his father died here at Compton. His mother later married a widower named Raleigh, who had 3 sons of his own. A popular Victorian painting by Sir John Millais depicts Gilbert and his new half-brother, who was to become the famous Sir Walter Raleigh. An old sailor on a Devon seashore points to the new world across the sea, spinning tales that supposedly inspired the lads to become their generation's leading exponents of colonization in North America. Gilbert was sent to Eton and Oxford to study navigation and military science. In 1554, a young Princess Elizabeth was sent to the Tower by Bloody Mary for Protestant plotting. An aunt of Humphrey Gilbert named Kate Ashley, a governess, volunteered to go to jail with the royal prisoner. When Elizabeth came to the throne in 1558, Kate Ashley was a palace favorite, and a bevy of her relatives descended upon London to take advantage of her connections. Among them was nephew Humphrey. His aunt introduced him at court, recommended him for a career in the royal service, and the young queen took an instant liking to the handsome young man from Devon. At 25, Humphrey Gilbert was serving in France with the English forces at Le Havre. He later volunteered to go to Ireland as the captain of a company of 100 men he'd recruited himself in Devon. They were to help put down a new rebellion in Ulster against Elizabeth. It was in Ireland that he heard others talk of the great riches in the new world beyond the sea, and he was first seized with a passion to explore this land across the Atlantic.
No, lad, you got it all wrong again. It sounds fine. The seized with a passion to explore business. But your facts are off. I was seized long before I went to Ireland.
The history book says that you wrote your famous discourse for a discovery for a new passage to Cathay, that's China.
I know it's China.
And that you wrote it in 1576. Now, that was after you came back from Ireland.
It was published in 1576. I wrote it, 15 years earlier, in the 60s. You see, what you have to understand is this, that anyone who was anyone in the court or scientific circles was only interested in two things: making a fortune by finding the secret of alchemy, turning lead or base metal into copper or gold, or making a fortune by finding a sea passage to the east, so that all those spices, jewels, gold and wealth that the Spaniards were bringing in every day in every ship could come to us. Well, you name them. There was Walsingham, John Dee, Frobisher, Drake, Carlisle. Oh, and of course, me. Seize a ship, they said. Find the passage. Your fortune would be untold.
What's that?
It's an astrolabe. The oldest navigational instrument known to man.
Yeah? Slowly.
Take a sighting of the sun with it. You have it upside down.
That's okay. Dr. Patrick O'Flaherty is a Newfoundland writer and teacher.
I think the Elizabethan mind was obsessed by Marco Polo still, you know, and he had told the Europeans that there was a great land of wealth and beauty in the east, in Cathay, and in Cipangu, that mythical island off the coast of Cathay, where roofs were inlaid with gold and where spices grew like weeds. And the initial attempt to move westward from Europe was an attempt to find this great source of gold and spice and power. Britain had nonetheless retained an interest in the northern parts of North America, because Cabot had taken possession of those parts for England in 1497, and Sebastian Cabot had, in 1508-9, tried to find a passage around North America. His idea was to go around North America to get to the spices of the East. It had failed. In 1527, there was another expedition to North America by one John Rutt with a similar idea to get around or to go through North America. And Gilbert was carrying on a kind of tradition that had already begun in English discovery. His discourse of a discovery for a new passage to Cathay, written in 1566, is in just this vein. It's a funny and preposterous book in some ways, although when you look at the map, you'll see that, in fact, there is a northwest passage, not too far out, and he does argue that there is such a passage, and of course he was right. He also proposes colonization of a sort. He thought it'd be a good idea to have a sort of halfway place between England and Cathay.
I took leave from soldiering in Ireland in 1566. October, I think it was. I came to London to see the Queen herself. I wanted to get her interested in my ideas and get a patent from her and some money, a great deal of money, so that we could make another search for the Northwest Passage.
And of course you didn't get the money, and you didn't get the patent.
No, I almost lost my head for trying. Oh, she was a hard woman, Gloriana. Stubborn as a goat and miserable over money. Why, she would squeeze a gold piece for a week before she'd let go of it. I took the liberty of bringing with me my charts, Your Majesty, and the map drawn to accompany my treatise. It shows uncontestably that a passage to Cathay through the Northwest above America is both practicable and feasible, as you will see here. If we were but given the ships, Majesty, to make a strong attempt, in faith we could outdo the Spaniards in bringing home our cargoes of spice and silk before the year is out. And in America itself...
God, can you leave off about America? I am sick of hearing everyone praise of nothing but America. What of Ireland? Do we stand here day after day and dream of America while Ireland goes in flames and do nothing for it?
Ulster is at peace. The rebellion's put down.
Is that what your ears hear? The rebellion is put down. That is not what mine are told this very hour in council.
Ulster is at peace. O'Neill is...
You took leave without permission from a military command to come here and waste my time with dreams and fantasy. Oh, Your ears need boxing as well as fixing, Master Gilbert.
Your Majesty, finding a Northwest Passage is not a fantasy.
Of course it is a fantasy. You are laughed at in some quarters, you and John D. and the rest. Now, we have wasted enough lives and ships and money and years on such silly theories.
If the Northwest Passage is a silly theory, madam, then the planting of colonies in North America is not.
Oh, it's the planting of colonies now, is it?
We have sorely neglected our claims to America since John Cabot found it for us, milady. The only way to make it ours now is to settle it. If not, we will lose it by default and live to see the Spanish claim the entire continent. That is not a silly theory.
And may we live to see the Spanish claim Ireland if we neglect that? Is that a silly theory? They have supplied the rebels, plotted with the Pope. If they could land troops there, we could see an invasion of England. Is that a silly theory?
Overwrought, perhaps, madam. But not silly.
Overwrought? Indeed. It could happen if our supposed leaders such as yourself are off on voyages to America, ignoring what presses us at home. You would have us settle the new world and lose the one we have while we're about it? Is that it?
Of course not, Majesty.
Then go back to Ireland. If you must plant colonies, plant them there. And tend to the business that disturbs this realm, as you have sworn to do. And tell the other dreamers you sit about with to do the same. You have been among my friends since childhood, Master Gilbert. My true and trusted friends from Devon. We must have peace in Ireland. It will be our ruin. I need a man I can trust to take charge. This work of trotting the bogs and marching the mountains is not suited to the English soldier. We must teach these rebels a lesson. Do this for us. And when you return, there will be time to talk of America.
Majesty.
Subdue the rebels he did. In 2 campaigns in the provinces of Ulster and Munster, Gilbert exhibited a viciousness and brutality that has seldom been equaled in the annals of empire building. He would lay siege to a castle like this one at Rathpyle in Ireland, giving the inhabitants a 24-hour ultimatum to surrender or face death. Most of the time they refused. And this report from his second-in-command, a Captain Ward, records Gilbert's response.
Within 3 hours we won it. It put to the sword 40 persons, man, woman, and child. The colonel commanding me under pain of death to put them all to the sword. Oh, they accounted him more like a devil than a man. They're now so afraid of him that they did leave and give up 26 castles.
To strike further terror into the Irish, he was fond of making the rebel leaders who came to surrender walk a ghastly promenade to his tent.
His manner was that the heads of all those that were killed in the day should be cut from their bodies at night, and should there be set side by side of the way leading to his tent, so that none could come but that commonly must pass through a line of heads.
Gilbert's hatred of the Irish was unrelenting, even in triumph. As the rebellion finally collapsed and the surrendering chieftains came to plead for the Queen's mercy, he was fond of telling them,
Be quiet. My dog's ears be too good to hear the speech of the noblest man among you. You were.
The English commander in Ireland, Sir Henry Sidney, summoned Gilbert to his military headquarters on New Year's Day, 1570, and conferred upon him a knighthood for his outstanding service in the pacification of the country. His ruthless ferocity in murdering 40 people right here in this castle at Ballingarry had become a legend. 10 years later, Sir Walter Raleigh, in taking his turn in suppressing yet another uprising in Munster, longed for the stern hand of his half-brother. Would God, he wrote, that the services of Sir Humphrey Gilbert might rightly be sought. I have not read nor heard of a man more feared among the Irish.
And then there is
Dr. Kieran Brady is a lecturer in history at Trinity College, Dublin.
Now, much of the stories that we get of Gilbert's conduct in Ireland come from later reports, come largely from the chapbooks of that scribbler Thomas Churchyard, who was terribly anxious to spin a good yarn. So you don't have to believe all the atrocity stories. But this aside, there is still very convincing contemporary evidence that Gilbert did what he claimed to do, that he was ruthless in war, that indeed he enjoyed his work, and that he would have continued the ruthless killing of men, women, and children as long as he deemed it necessary. He had a very small collection of men, at most I would say about 500 men. He had to operate on a very restricted budget, and he had to operate in a fairly short space of time. So when Gilbert came to Ireland, he desperately needed to impress these people of his seriousness of purpose. The threat of the sword was only effective if occasionally the sword was used, and occasionally the sword was used. When he was attacking the Tower Houses, when he was putting man, woman, and child to the sword, when he was, in short, behaving in this ruthless fashion, he was doing no more than beating the natives at their own game. Gilbert was a man of the Renaissance, a typical Renaissance figure, if you like. Articulate, well-read, an intellectual, man of ideas, but also a man of action, a man with the courage of his convictions, if you like, daring, ruthless, and brave. He may or may not have been a sadist, I don't know, but he was certainly quite a butcher. But finally, I think that the final impression that Gilbert leaves me with is less of the Renaissance figure, or less of the brutal man, than that of the loser. Almost everything he tried, every colonizing enterprise, quest for the Northwest Passage, the chance to make a career for himself in Ireland, turned to dust in his hands. He was used by the Crown, in Parliament, in Ireland, let go off and take his chances on the high seas, and yet never received any public reward, any permanent job, any sinecure. He died a bankrupt. It's not quite tragic, this story of a frenetic, a brave, and ultimately futile career, but it is, it seems to me, extremely sad.
Even if the Irish could not, Gilbert easily rationalized his behavior in an era of brutality. No conquered nation will ever yield willingly their obedience for love, he said, but only for fear. He returned to England in the fall of 1570, tired of soldiering, but full of enthusiasm for a voyage of exploration to the new world that everyone was talking about. He set about gathering investors for the expedition and once again approached Queen Elizabeth for moral and financial support. This time he was successful. She rewarded him with a royal patent, allowing 6 years for settlement of the new territories and giving him almost exclusive title to their wealth and trade.
Know ye that of our especial grace we have given and granted to our trustee and well-beloved servant, Sir Humphrey Gilbert.
Pause. A pause. Look, I didn't leave Ireland in 1570 and set straight out for here, you know. A lot of water went down the Thames before that happened, laddie. You're missing a lot of important facts. For instance, I got married.
Well, it was about time. You were 32 years old.
That's exactly what Raleigh said. So I made up for lost time. I had 6 sons and 1 daughter in as many years. Well, at least my wife did. Myself and John Hawkins got ourselves elected as members of Parliament for Plymouth. I went overseas again, to the Netherlands, at the head of a company of 1,500 men. And it took me 8 years of persuading to talk that woman into granting me a patent to come over here again.
8 years. Costume's all wrong, you know.
That looks all right.
Now, know ye that of our special grace we have given and granted to our trusty and well-beloved servant, Sir Humphrey Gilbert, powers to discover, find, search out, and view ye such remote heathen and barbarous lands, not actually possessed of any Christian prince.
Gilbert was always better at planning than doing. And it shouldn't surprise us that he had no difficulty, or appears to have had little difficulty, in assembling a large fleet for the purpose in Plymouth in November of 1578. He had 10 ships, 175 guns, heavily armed, and 570 men. As soon as he had them assembled, he got in trouble. 3 of them left him straight away and went off to their own devices. And the 7 others left Plymouth on the 18th of November, but they had to put into Cork because 3 of them sprung leaks. And one of these 3 returned to England. Stores were getting short. Possibly there was trouble with the crew, but what was left of his squadron anyway set out into the North Atlantic in February of 1579. A hard time to head into the North Atlantic. They were back in Dartmouth in April, with very little of anything accomplished. I suppose he had intended to head south to harass and plunder the Spanish ships in the Caribbean, and then come up north along the coast of North America and find a place for his colony. But the whole thing came to grief. It was another in a lifetime of calamities. He lost his personal fortune, and Elizabeth was left with more evidence about his doubtful capacities for leadership and organization. Hereafter, she would regard him as a man noted of no good hap at sea.
God and the devil, it was an inglorious disaster, all right. 11 ships half-wrecked. 500 men.
And 3 years of your patent run out.
More than 3 years. I had no money left. I'd sold my homes, my properties, the very clothes off my wife's back to finance that plan. But I had to try again. I could not give up my dream. I had nothing but one person who had become a great favorite at the court. He was the only one who could help me persuade the Queen to let me try again. My half-brother, Walter Raleigh. He'd become something of a favorite with her. Indeed he had.
Sir Walter? The one who laid his cloak in the mud for her?
That's another story from your history book. He'd become her lover by then, although she was 20 years older. Had a bit of an eye for the young ones, old Gloriana. You know, they said that she was known as the Virgin Queen. As a queen, she was a great success. But Raleigh could get anything he wanted from her, and he persuaded her to let me try again.
And once you had her blessing, the rest was simple.
No. Nothing was ever simple with that woman.
This time, Gilbert's plan was to seek out a site for a permanent colony in North America. He'd interested several Catholic leaders in the idea of a planned mass immigration for their persecuted minority. And Sir Henry Sidney had purchased title to 3 million acres of the unknown land. By the spring of 1583, he was ready to sail again. But either his past blunders or his enemies had convinced Elizabeth that Sir Humphrey was not the man to head another costly expedition, and her interference infuriated him.
But why? In heaven's name, why?
Because I am too cautious. Because I have a presentiment of danger. But I do not want you to accompany this expedition.
But surely you'll give me some other reasons, Majesty, than presentiments of danger.
Very well, then. The last attempt was disaster. £1 million squandered, 4 ships wrecked.
3.
It was mismanagement.
It was bad weather, contrary winds, dissension, jealousy.
It was you, Master Gilbert. You were a fine soldier. That does not make you a good sailor, too.
Name me the man that tells you this. bring him before me. And if he live long, let me die in dishonor.
It is not one man who says it. There are many. And they are your friends, not your enemies.
A friend could not say such a thing. A friend would not say such a thing.
Master Gilbert, you are a man of no good happenstance by sea. It has been proven.
Your Majesty, I have spent half a lifetime and all my fortune preparing for this voyage. With your favor for my 28 years' service to your person, I beg you to let me get my living as well as I may. Do not constrain me by my idle abode at home to beg my bread with my wife and my children.
I'm trying to save you the agony. Perhaps there's really no need for you to go. There's great danger on that ocean for a man of slight experience.
Mutare vel temere, spare no majesty. A man is not worthy to live at all if he shuns his country's service or his own honor for fear of danger or death. I would be disgraced if I did not go. I must make that voyage.
I wish you as great goodness and safety to your ship, then, as if I myself were sailing with you. Take this and make a safe return.
An anchor guided by a lady. Most gracious Majesty.
Master Gilbert, I have no likeness of you. Send me a miniature before you leave.
Mutare vel timere sperno, Sir Humphrey replied to the Queen at her suggestion that he relinquish his command of the expedition. I spurn change and fear. It was his favorite Latin epigram. He'd used it to close out his famous discourse. Along with the family's motto, quid non, why not, it typified the man's spirit and determination. It was from this harbor, at Cossan Bay, down the Devon coast from Plymouth, that Gilbert's fleet of 5 ships set out one bright June day in 1583, with the General, as he liked to be styled, standing proudly on the afterdeck of his flagship, the Delight. The first signs of impending disaster came 2 days later when the largest ship in the fleet, the bark Raleigh, lent by Sir Walter, turned back to Plymouth. It was reported that syphilis was discovered among the crew. Others reported that they had mutinied, refusing to sail under Gilbert's command. The most experienced captain in the fleet was Edward Hayes of the Golden Hind, and it is to his journal that historians must turn for a complete record of the voyage.
From Saturday the 15th of June until the 28th, we never had a fair day without fog or rain. Upon the 20th of July, we could not keep well together, but were dissevered, losing company of the swallow and the squirrel. Tuesday, the 30th of July, 7 weeks from home, we got sight of land, but so great a haze and fog did hang upon the coast, as neither we might discern it well.
We struck into what we call the Grand Bay, what you now call the Straits of Belle Isle. We moved southward with fair weather until we reached the island called Penguin. You have it, the Funks. And then the island called Bacalao, below which lies the great Bay of Conception, where we met with one of our ships lost earlier to us in the fog, the Swallow. We followed the coast, southward 5 leagues, until we came to the harbor of St. John's. Lying off, just out there at anchor, we found our 4th ship, the Squirrel. Flying 36 ships within the harbor, we made ready our guns and prepared to enter. They wouldn't let us through at first. Thought we were pirates, as I told you. We sent word that we were come to take possession of the land in the name of Her Most Gracious Majesty. And they soon pulled in their horns. It was a Saturday, August 3rd, 1583, that we came sailing through. A great day for England. Great day for the Gilberts. And then we struck that accursed rock.
The Chain Rock. Pancake Rock.
Right. We got the Delight off with little damage and anchored inside. Then all those impudent foreigners provided us the wherewithal for a mighty feast. Lobsters, salmons, trouts, the best of the marmalades, the best of the wines from the Bretons. Oh, I can tell you, Mr. Brown, that was a triumph I relished.
And she said, Mr. Parmenius, did you lose the key to your chastity belt? And I replied, I never had one.
Oh, this will be a feast I shall relish. Gentlemen, why? Captain Winter. Stephen. Master Brown.
But in my heart, where duty serves and loves, turtles and twin fought brood a heavenly pair. Happy the heart that thinks of no remorse, of no remorse, of no remorse. Happy the heart that thinks of no remorse, of no remorse, of no remorse.
Fine day.
Quickly, they're coming.
On Monday, we came ashore and went on a hill to take formal possession of the land. Elizabeth, by the grace of God, Queen of England, to all people whom these presents shall come, sends greetings. Know ye that of our special grace, certain science and mere notion, we to our well-beloved servant Humphrey Gilbert have given and granted free liberty and license to discover, find, search out and view
Myself, Master Brown, Master Andrews and Master Winters were present when he took possession of the land in the right of the Crown.
Ah, very fertile.
They dug up a turf, and he received the same with a hazel wand delivered unto him, after the manner of the law and customs of England.
Ah, yes.
Gilbert laid claim to the harbour at St. John's and all land within 200 leagues on either side. This put him in possession of the entire eastern seaboard of Canada, the 4 Atlantic provinces, and a great deal of Labrador and Quebec. The better part of the fortnight following he spent exploring the Newfoundland coastline, going ashore at the well-known harbour of Trepassey. He pronounced himself so delighted with the climate and the prospects for trade and settlement that he had now become a northern man altogether, and this voyage has won my heart from the south. On August 20th, he transferred to his smallest vessel, the Squirrel, and led the Hind and the Delight out through the St. John's Narrows. He wanted to reconnoiter as far south as Rhode Island, seeking an ideal site for a plantation. He left behind the Swallow with a number of sick and injured men who were desperate to return to England. On the 29th, they struck a heavy southwest gale off Sable Island, and by morning, the flagship Delight was driven on a sandbar and wrecked with the loss of over 100 men. A great store of provisions for the return voyage home and a priceless collection of mineral, plant, and timber samples from the New World also went to the bottom.
Now, you were going to blame me for that too, weren't you?
There seems to be some evidence that you were responsible.
The captain of the Delight, Master Winter, was saved with 16 other men. And when he got home, he said that he'd wanted to sail west-southwest, that I'd come alongside in the frigate and ordered him in the Queen's name to sail west-northwest. But there's not a word of truth in it. They were all drunk. We were just trying to keep them off the shoals.
There were more storms?
2 days without surcease.
The crew begged you to return to England, to give up exploring. And you turned back.
They were half starved for food, half crazed with fear, the poor devils. I thought we'd come back again the next spring. But, sad to say, yes. We turned back.
Captain Hayes said that he wanted you to come on board the Golden Hind to return home.
I'd driven a nail through my foot and went on board the Hind to have it dressed by the surgeon. Hayes said that I should stay because she was much larger and sturdier than the Squirrel. A man makes many mistakes in his lifetime, and then one final one. That was mine. I went back aboard that little vessel. I suppose it started with my first failure, and the Queen asking me not to sail. But I wanted to prove that I was a good sailor, and comfort the crew a bit too. You should have seen me standing on the afterdeck, facing proudly into the Atlantic wind, as the Squirrel sailed out to sea, the very picture of a fearless sea dog. But that was the end of it, lad. That was the end of it.
Somewhere off the Azores, the two vessels ran into still another horrendous gale, and the Squirrel was almost cast away, but recovered, and the Golden Hind came close by and saw Sir Humphrey sitting on the afterdeck reading. In fact, the very picture of the fearless sea dog. Captain Hayes hailed him again to come aboard the larger vessel, whereupon Sir Humphrey delivered his famous reply, "We are as near to heaven by sea as by land." Edward Hayes continues the story.
Same Monday night, about 12 o'clock, or not long after, the frigate being ahead of us, suddenly her lights went out, whereof, as it were, in a moment we lost the sight. And withal our watch cried, "The General is cast away," which was too true. For in that moment, the frigate was devoured and swallowed up by the sea.
We are as near to heaven by sea as by land.
It's not easy to summarize Gilbert's character. There were many ugly sides to his nature. For example, his savagery towards the Irish. There's not enough to say about that everybody did it in the 16th century, because his ferocity was noted among his contemporaries, so he was especially barbarous in his treatment of that race. His temper tantrums were savage. You can note in the things he says, and the things he writes, his greed and his vanity. So these are some of the negative qualities in him. It's hard to suggest many positive qualities. He was, I think, at essence, a dreamer, an inveterate, restless experimenter and planner. Gilbert was always having fantasies about things, about alchemy, about defeating the Spanish, about the glories of Elizabeth and her reign, about the glories of England, about reaching Cathay, founding a university, finding silver mines in St. John's, establishing a colonial utopia. Thinking big was the hallmark of Gilbert's character. He began the story of English colonization of North America. He started the process of building Canada as it is now, and so we remember him. The thing about Gilbert was that all these dreams he had seemed to come to grief. There was a magnetic quality in the man that drew others to him, that led them to invest in what he wanted to do, that led them to believe in him. Even Elizabeth, who was a very shrewd judge of character, eventually gave him permission to go on that second voyage, you see. So there was some quality in Gilbert, some kind of magic in him that led people, that drew people to him, and that's something too you sense in the documents about him, that he did have that fire, that power of personality, which tended to dominate other men and to make others believe that what he said was true.
Although it ended in failure, Gilbert's voyage opened the floodgates of colonization in North America. Within a year, attempts were made to settle Virginia. Within 5, the French were wintering in Quebec. Outside of Newfoundland, Gilbert has been given little recognition for this achievement. In 1933, the Newfoundland government issued a set of stamps to mark the 350th anniversary of Sir Humphrey's visit. Collector's items today, they bear his portrait, coat of arms, token, and crest. And this is a model of the Sir Humphrey Gilbert Memorial Center, planned for a site adjacent to his landing spot on the shores of St. John's Harbor. A fitting tribute to the daring and vision of an outstanding visitor, it will house a theater, museum, and art galleries. Cruel and brave, rash and daring, Gilbert's dedication to his country changed the history of ours and many others. For without his determination to re-establish an English presence in even a remote fishing station in Newfoundland, we might be speaking to you today, like the other half of the New World, in Portuguese or Spanish. I'm Harry Brown. Adios, amigos míos. On todo, Canada.
Of Elizabeth I, reproduced through the courtesy of Viscount de Lisle, the Marquis of Tavistock, and by the gracious permission of Her Majesty the Queen. Location filming through the courtesy of the National Trust at Compton Castle and Parks Canada at Signal Hill.